What's going on, everyone? Darkside Phil here, and welcome to another edition of the Hateful Truth game review series. And today we will be talking about a game that takes a well-established sci-fi slash fantasy line of games and tries to bring it into a completely new genre. Now, this game line is actually known more for its fantasy stories, books and things that have been written about it, and tabletop gaming. Now, over the past decade or so, there have been several attempts to convert this world, this fantasy world, into the realm of video games. For most of the attempts, they've been real-time strategy. And so this is really the first time that this 30-year-old, I don't even know what to call it. It's not really a story. It's not really, I guess I would just say this fantasy sci-fi entity has now been tried to brought into this new genre of gaming, which is the third-person shooter slash action game, because they actually do attempt some interesting new things with this game. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we are discussing Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine for the Xbox 360. And first, what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about the campaign, then we'll talk about the multiplayer, and then I'll give it an overall review. So the campaign, I have to say, is kind of unique, but maybe not so much. You're going to notice a lot of things in this campaign that are reminiscent of other games that have, in their own right, been successful games. For example, the gunplay of Space Marine is very similar to Gears of War. You're going to get multiple guns that you're going to be able to use throughout the course of the game. You'll have sniper weapons, you'll have machine guns, you'll have shotgun-style weapons, and you'll be able to find ammo, plentiful ammo throughout the game to use these weapons. But in addition to just the gunplay, there's also melee combat, and so there's going to be ample opportunity for you in this game to explore both of these. Now, just like other games that have melee combat, you're going to have the ability to do stun moves. You're going to have the ability to do combos, even though the combos aren't very complex. The longest combo in the game is only 3 hits. And it's funny because the only way for you to recover health in Space Marine is to stun an opponent and then do basically like a quick time execution on that enemy, okay? And what that entails is either hitting Y to stun them or to do a combo into a stun, which is like XY. It's 2 quick hits and then a stun, and then pressing your B button to execute them and get some health back. Now, similarly to a lot of other games of this genre, you have regenerating health, and on top of that you have a regenerating shield. I'm sorry, you actually don't have regenerating health, you have a regenerating shield. Let me re-explain that. For example, like in Halo, you have health, but you also have a shield, both of which regenerate. Not so in this game. In this game, your shield will regenerate, but once your shield is out, once you start losing your actual health bar, the only way to get it back is to do those execution kills. This could be an interesting game mechanic in some parts, and could be a little bit frustrating in other parts, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the gameplay of Space Marine is basically fighting mobs of melee combat, and then switching it up and going to your gunplay to kill off some of the tougher enemies, some of the enemies that are more ranged and have guns. In fact, as you get further into the game, there are a lot more ranged enemies near the last third of the game where you start to really have to get good with your guns, rather than rely primarily on your melee combat. Now, as you kill enemies, you build up what's called a Fury meter, and that Fury meter allows you to go into, say, a Fury mode, where you do increased damage, and your health finally does actually regenerate over time, and it's really cool to just go apeshit once you activate that Fury and just start attacking things left and right. Now, you have to caution you, because if you're going to use the melee combat and you like the melee combat, you have to be very careful, because it's not like a lot of other games where if you go into a certain animation, you're invincible and impervious from harm. In this game, you can get hit during any attack animation and you're going to take damage. In fact, you can even get hit during Fury, and you can get hit during your execution animations. And so it might be a little bit frustrating at times when you're desperately trying to execute someone because you're about to die, and you're in the middle of the execution animation, about to get life back, and then some guy runs up and punches you from behind and you die. So there's a little bit of a worry there, a little bit of you have to be apprehensive with what you do in this game, rather than just run around willy-nilly swinging your weapons wildly, you know, like you're a god. You actually take significant damage in this game, and you have to be very careful with what you do with your health management, okay? The story of the game, you are a Space Marine, and you have a squad, and you are basically trying to fight off an orc invasion. And there are some plot twists about halfway, that's a little bit over halfway through the game. So there is a major plot twist, which then introduces something completely different that you did not expect up to that point. And I have to say, this game does an excellent job of implementing that, because about that point in the game, I was starting to say, gee, this is starting to get repetitive. You know, I'm fighting the same enemies over and over. I really wish that something different would happen, and I was actually worried that they weren't going to mix it up, and then they do at the perfect time. So I have to say, the pacing and everything with this game, the fact that they have the plot twist at that certain time, is excellent. I don't want to spoil it, but let me just say, there are multiple races from the Warhammer 40k lore in the game, and so you won't be bored just with humans versus orcs, let's put it that way. And so, that is pretty much par for the game and what it is, the single-player campaign. You will eventually, you know, try to stop the invasion, and then after the plot twist, you have to do something else until the end of the game, and it has a pretty decent ending. Boss battles, there are a couple, and one of them is pretty standard boss fare, where you're fighting a guy head up, and he has a lot of life, and he calls minions to help him, but then he comes down to actually fight you mano a mano, and that's a pretty fun one. And then there's another one that's just a quick time event, which isn't so good. But well, let's talk about the things I liked about the game, the things I didn't like about the game, so that we can get into it, okay? The things I like about Space Marine. First of all, I really enjoy getting immersed in the Warhammer lore. I do. I like these characters. You might think that they're reminiscent of a lot of things that we've seen. For example, StarCraft, Warcraft, Gears of War. But the thing is, the Warhammer lore has been around for 30 years. So actually, even though this is like the first third-person action game from these guys, and you're going to see a lot of elements in this game that seem to maybe have taken from other stuff, these guys did it first. It just took them a long time to get around to making these kind of video games. So it's hard for me to say, oh man, you know, the orcs, they look like they're taken right out of Warcraft, and, you know, he looks like Marcus Phoenix from Gears of War. But he came first. You know, these guys actually came first, so I can't say that they're copying. They really aren't. The other guys copied off of them in the video game world first, and now they're finally getting around to getting into video games like this as well. So I like it, and I like the fact that it's an adult design. I mean, there's a lot of gore in the game with these executions and such, but at the same time, it actually does have a little bit of a cartoony feel to it. It almost looks like a combination of World of Warcraft and Gears of War, if you can kind of picture that in your head. So I like that. I like the graphical design, the art design. The graphics in the game are very detailed, very interesting for what it is. Obviously, it's not super detailed, but that's because they're going for this fantasy aspect. They don't want it to be super duper gritty or anything like that. Voice acting is okay, music's okay. It never really caught me or gripped me during the course of the game. But the gameplay for me, some of it I enjoyed and some of it I didn't. I think it's hit or miss, and it depends on what kind of person you are and what kind of gameplay you prefer. So let me explain. Being that you take damage so much, for example, some grenades, like you might get hit by a grenade and there's nothing you can do. It's there right at your feet and immediately explodes. You'll lose your entire shield. And in some cases near the end of the game, you'll lose your entire shield and a big chunk of your health. And you're like, holy shit, you really take damage a lot. Like, you don't feel like you're playing Gears of War or God of War or any of these games where there's melee combat and you just take monstrous amounts of damage. You actually feel vulnerable in Space Marine. And I'm sure it was intentional to try to make the game a little bit different, but it gets a little bit frustrating, especially when you're enjoying the melee combat. You know, there's a monstrous group of enemies coming at you and you're slashing through them, killing them left and right, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 you're dead within a second. And you're like, fuck, I was having fun, but it's kind of weird because in this game you play an Ultramarine, and from what I'm to understand in the Warhammer 40k universe, they're supposed to be like the badasses of badasses. Like, you can't fuck with an Ultramarine, they will fuck your shit up. So why are they portrayed in this game like such wimps? Like they get punched in the face twice and now they're gonna die. It's just, I don't get that. I don't understand that. I thought maybe if they had made you a little bit stronger, have a little bit more life, it would have been a little bit better. For me, I really enjoyed the gunplay. I actually enjoyed playing this game more like a Gears of War than anything else. I loved using the different weapons. I liked the variety of the weapons. Some of the weapons charge for more powerful attacks. Some of them are just, you know, standard machine guns. Some of them are shotguns that can really be useful for up-close combat, especially if there's a whole mob coming at you and you're about to die. You just use the shotgun to clear them out. So I liked that aspect of the game. For me, the melee, I think, was a little bit too limited. The melee attacks, like I said, the longest combo you can do is 3 hits. And it's like, you know, they really, if they had gone a little bit further, like they did with God of War, or Bayonetta, or Devil May Cry, and they had a more advanced combat system where you could learn longer combos and special attacks and abilities during the course of the game, I think the game would have been a lot better. But they don't do that. It's a very simple combat system. You're either going to do a stun or 1 or 2 quick hits and then try to stun so that you can get that execution kill and get some health back, and that's it. And that's pretty much it for the whole entirety of the game. It never evolves, it never develops, and I think they came a little bit short there. But that being said, after beating the game, I have to say that I did enjoy it for the most part, even though there are a couple parts that are overly difficult, where all of a sudden you're just overwhelmed with a certain amount of enemies. Sometimes there's melee guys coming at you and guys shooting, and you have to decide, who am I going to fight first? And if you make the wrong choice, you're going to die. There's also parts of the game where it's just ridiculous. So, you know, I remember at the end of the game, there was one room, a whole bunch of ranged guys with guns came out, immediately chucked 2 grenades at me. I had no opportunity to do anything, because if I dodge the grenades, I'm going to lose my cover and get murdered. If I stay there, the grenades are going to kill me. So it was a lose-lose situation. And one other thing that I do want to mention, the game doesn't have a formal cover system like Gears of War does. There's no way to go up behind a wall or behind a table and peer around the edge. You're just standing behind there, and you have to walk out, shoot, and then walk back. That's the only way to really do cover in this game, per se. And it can be frustrating at times when you're just... This game is screaming for a cover system in certain portions of the game, and you just wish that they had gone that extra mile and put that into the game, even though they didn't. And just to warn everyone, not spoiling, but there is a very anticlimactic ending, because the final boss fight is, the entirety of it ends up being a quick time event, to which you're like, man, I really would have loved to have a boss fight where I can finally, you know, unload all my weapons and go nuts on this last guy, maybe implement some melee with it, and it just never happens. You have to do a quick time event and then the game's over, and you're like, man, that kind of stunk. It kind of deflated at the end of the game. But that's the campaign. I think the campaign's a mixed bag. I think that if they make a sequel, which I think they definitely should do, that the campaign will be better in the sequel. This was their first attempt, Relic Entertainment, at making this kind of action-oriented combat game, and I think that they're going to do better if they give it another try. It's not bad, and the length of the campaign is roughly 6 hours, give or take. So it's your average length campaign for a retail game these days, which honestly is kind of sad. I wish they were longer, but it's still an entertaining experience, and I did enjoy the campaign of this game, despite the couple frustrations and the limited melee combat, okay? Now, the multiplayer of this game, I have to say I enjoy it a lot. The multiplayer of this game is very reminiscent of something like Transformers War for Cybertron, where you get to pick a certain class who gets a certain style of weapon and certain perks, and as you play the game online, you level up, unlocking new weapons, new abilities, new perks, the ability to create your own custom loadouts. And I played this for about 2 to 2.5 hours online, and the gameplay completely changed. First I was playing as a guy with a machine gun who could dodge left and right. Then I changed it up and turned into a guy who was a heavy, who couldn't dodge at all, but had the ability to really lay into people with a super heavy machine gun. Then I got a sniper-style weapon, and I started sniping people. So really, the gameplay can change dramatically. And there's actually jetpacks, which allow you to do super jumps across the map, and you can become a melee-style fighter there, where you have a melee weapon, and your goal is to land on top of someone and then start meleeing them to death. And of course, there are perks to counter that make you more defensive against melee attacks and so forth. So I really enjoy it. I think it's similar to War for Cybertron. You're going to have grenades, you're going to have customized weapons. It's the same kind of leveling up system, and I think it's done pretty well. I do. Maybe you could use a little bit more polish, but for the couple hours that I played it online, I had a lot of fun. The connections, except for one game, were pretty decent for me, and I enjoyed it a lot. So I have to say the multiplayer is an extreme plus. And the level cap, by the way, is 41. And I played for about 2 hours, and I got to about level 11, I want to say. So you figure if you were to play hardcore, it probably would take you 8 to 10 hours to get anywhere up there in the rankings. So you're going to get another 8 to 10 hours minimal of enjoyment out of this game from the multiplayer, and it's a lot of fun. So I have to say, this is a pretty decent game. There's one thing I do want to warn everyone, though. And I found this out from my friend. I have a friend who bought this game for the PlayStation 3. apparently, now this is launch week, keep in mind, the game's not even a week old yet. Apparently there are major matchmaking problems on the PlayStation 3. People are trying to get into matches, and it's taking upwards of an hour to even form one match and get it together. So I want to warn everyone, if you're buying this game relatively soon after its release, there hasn't been a patch yet as of Sunday, which is, well, actually now it's Monday. Now it's Monday, September 12th. It's late. It's actually midnight. So as of Monday, September 12th, there's still no patch to fix it on the PlayStation 3. If you have a choice, I recommend getting it either on PC or 360 for now, until they eventually get a patch out, hopefully, to fix it. And then I would say, you know, get it on the PlayStation 3. Because you're definitely going to want to play the multiplayer. There's a good amount of content there that is worth playing, and it's fun, and it's... The one disappointing thing about the multiplayer for me, the amount of maps. There's only like 4 or 5 maps, and there's only 2 game modes. There's Team Deathmatch and like a capture area. It's kind of like domination from Call of Duty, where you control certain areas and get points that accumulate during the course of the match. Not sure why there's so few multiplayer modes. They are a lot of fun, but that being said, once you level up to, say, the higher levels and you unlock most of the weapons, you're probably going to get bored, which is why I said you'll probably get another 8 hours of content out of it, and then you're going to want to get rid of it. Now, maybe there'll be DLCs down the road to add more kinds of multiplayer content. I don't know. It is kind of limited as it is, and that's why I can't give it a super high score or anything like that, but it's still fun when you're playing it. So, again, I don't recommend the PlayStation 3 version simply because it's having matchmaking problems right now. Hopefully they'll be fixed. Okay? So overall, what do you get? You get a pretty fun, decent campaign that combines a lot of elements, you know, takes the elements from a game like Gears of War and tries to throw in some melee aspects that aren't in that game. And so it's an interesting combination. Again, like I said, I think that if they have a sequel, then it's going to be a lot more interesting, and I think that they're going to learn from the things maybe that they fell a little bit short here in the first installment, and hopefully refine it to be a better game. But it's still not a bad experience. It's an enjoyable campaign, an enjoyable story experience, and I think you're going to like it. And the multiplayer is pretty good. And, you know, getting 6 to 8 hours of enjoyment out of the multiplayer, add that to the 6-hour campaign, this is a pretty good game. It's not great, it's not Game of the Year, but it's not a bad game. And on my rating scale, again, I know I pretty much reiterate this in every Hateful Truth, but this is for people who don't watch every Hateful Truth review that I do. My ratings are on a 10 scale, 1 to 10, but they're very honest. So don't get me wrong, by my rating of this game, I'm going to give Space Marine a 7.5. To me, that's pretty good. That means it's way better than average, it's way better than just above average, and it's just under being a great game. You know, if I had it in the 8s, and then I would probably say it's great, it's an absolute, you know, if you should buy this. What I will say is this: if you're a fan of Warhammer 40k, you should get this game. It's a lot of fun. I think it does the series justice. If you are a fan of like a third-person action-style game and you're looking for something that not only is going to have an interesting campaign, but you're going to get several hours of multiplayer enjoyment out of it, this is your game, okay? If you're looking for something that's a Gears of War clone, you probably don't want this, because it's going to, either you can play the game like a Gears of War clone, it's better enjoyed if you use all the different aspects of the game. And if you're looking for something that's like, I absolutely can only buy one game this month, then no, I wouldn't recommend Space Marine. There's a lot of other stuff coming out, such as Gears of War 3, other good games like Dead Island, other stuff that's coming out, or that's been coming out, that's pretty good, and I would say this is a good game, almost great. I would recommend it to those people to buy, who I recommended it to. I would say it's a good rental, but actually when you think about it, for a rental, 6 to 7 hour campaign plus 8 to 10 hours of multiplayer, you might want to buy it, you know? You might get your enjoyment out of it. So anyway, 7.5 for Warhammer 40k Space Marine, a good effort from Relic Entertainment. I hope that they make a sequel so they can improve upon some of the little things that they fell short on, a little bit more refinement, and I think this game could be a great game and end up actually being maybe a blockbuster hit next time around. Okay? So that's it for the Hateful Truth. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that it was informative for you and that you now know whether or not to buy Space Marine. And I will see you guys next time for the next review. Thanks.